We're talking about pressure. This is one of my little stories back in the day. Believe it or not, there was pressure. Louis Thunder Thumbs Johnson. The time that I was a teenager, one of, not the baddest bass players at the time, man. Everybody was talking about Louis Johnson, man, about the Brothers Johnson, who laid down the funkiest tracks ever. A man who claimed that, he never really knew at the time about Larry Johnson. I mean, about Sly and the Family Stone and Brother Larry on bass. He claimed he didn't know him at the time. No disrespect. He said at the time when he was coming up, he developed his thumping style on his own. Now, maybe he might have heard about Larry Graham or on the side, or he didn't realize it that he was. But what Larry Graham ultimately invented and started, Louis Johnson even took it further. He wild man on the bass when it came to thumping and stuff like that. And quite frankly, me coming up learning bass at the time in my anywhere from beginning to intermediate stages, people expected you to play like Louis Johnson. And to the point that if you couldn't emulate what he was doing, you couldn't play bass. Man, you can't get down, you can't do the thing, Dude, it's like, I didn't want to, but I had to. I had to learn how to thump. And it's like, at the time, when you first started on a new technique on bass, you can't do it. I'm still trying to hit the strings wrong, either thumping them too loud or not pulling them aloft, stuff like that. Breaking G strings, trying to play like Louis Johnson and Larry Graham. But people were utilizing it, even people like Stanley Clarke at the time, who played jazz fusion. He did a lot of the popping and things like that, and put it in jazz music, that avant-garde jazz music. And I was like, wow. So it was like unavoidable. You had to learn how to play. So I had, gone to various you learned a lot of some of these music stores they had back then. This is before Guitar Center and Sam Ashford. They just had those mom and pop music stores. And in the Michigan area, in Detroit, we had Grinnell's. Grinnell's was a music store that had been in business since I think the 1930s, if I'm not mistaken, until that time. I would just go out and hang out, buy things every once in a while. Sometimes they'd have to chase me out of the store. But I would meet people, and I would meet bass players that knew how to thump, and they would try to show me how to thump. So I would get down there and say, yeah. Kept at it. It was so frustrating because I couldn't do it at first. But when I finally started to get the hang of it, I noticed that a lot of people would, pay more attention to you, and they would try to get you to play in their bands, just by knowing how to thump and pluck, and it was such a cool, distinctive sound even today. Thumping and plucking. You also learn, when to use it and when not to use it. You don't thump on a lot of ballads and stuff like that, or traditional gospel you didn't thump. Now they do. Ain't that interesting? You don't play like that in church. That's that devil's music. You don't play like that. Now they do just about every kind of style in church now. So it took a few years, that's not going to infiltrate it. You also found out about how, what brand and kind of basses would have a nice thumping sound and some others wouldn't. Fender, used by Larry Graham and sometimes Louis Johnson, was like at the time the perfect one to thump on. That had the thump sound. That you can get it to that trebly kind of almost intermediate style, a baritone style, where you can have that rough, funky style when you played like Larry Graham or Louis Johnson. But some others did not have the sort of sound, the pickups and everything that really could get that funky sound out, like the Gibson. The Gibsons weren't at the time weren't thump basses. Nah, they weren't. And some others, you know, usually Fender. Fender was the kind. Gibson, that's more rock and roll. But eventually, all these independent and professional companies will come out with a thumpy style bass. They would get into what you call active electronics, as you know, something that was pioneered, they say, by the Olympic Company. And yeah, so anyway, yeah, so it affected your life. If you couldn't play that way, you didn't get a lot of gigs. You know, hey man, can't you pop, man? Can't you? I don't know how to do that. Oh, okay, next. You know, so I just wanted to come here and tell that little story about, you know, how it affected me like that. It was like something, thumping and popping was like something you had to know how to do, or you want to get the favor of your fellow musicians, the crowd out there. You know, the crowd loved the sound and they wanted to yell, "Hey, get the bass player some, get the bass player some," and you'd have to get up there and start, you know, doing your thing. You know, it's something, but it's I encourage any bass player, you know, you play how you want to play, do the music you want to do, but you to get into other styles would be cool. I mean, you know, I say a bass line is a bass line. I don't care if I'm playing polka. Polka has bass lines to it, and I can play that too. It doesn't matter. I'm not music prejudiced like that. So and I would advise anybody, you know, if you've never tried the thump style, go ahead and give it a try. See if you can do it, and then you'll have something else to really concentrate on and kind of advance yourself. You know, it's good to have different styles, good to do different things and different music. So yeah, so this is one of my stories, my bass stories, and how that kind of style just kind of, for at least a while, just took over everything. It was like the Beatles had came with the British invasion. That just took over the bassdom with everybody, that funky style, and it's still out there today. So I invite you to try it if you haven't. Earl Davis, Smack's Proud Channel. Thought I'd just give that little story. I'll see you later.